I think meaning is incredibly important, and while I disagree with Jordan Peterson on a number of things, I think he's absolutely right when it comes to needing a structure to your life and a sense of meaning and a story. It's just that I disagree on what that story should be. It's challenging, but I do think it has to be somewhat individuated. As Viktor Frankl said, when it comes to meaning in life, you can't answer this question in sweeping statements that just work for everyone.
Welcome to The Shape of Dialogue, Travis. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Travis Brown. I'm a filmmaker and documentaries and narrative films, and I often collaborate with Peter Boghossian, as I know you've had him on. And right now we're just traveling around the world filming a lot of street epistemology and conversations and that sort of thing. And then I have some of my own documentaries that I've been making, some which are out and some that are pending. So,
right.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your Woke Reformation series on YouTube, which I'll have in the show notes, so everyone should go and listen to it. One thing I didn't know about you is your Christian background.
Yeah.
So that's always interesting, that stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of a key motivating factor, sort of, leaving my faith and losing my faith just gave me an interesting perspective on a lot of the cultural phenomenon that we're seeing now.
Right. I also want to apologize to the viewers because we've got some building going on downstairs, so there'll be a few bangs. Anyway, so can we drill down into that? So if you don't mind. Yeah. So what sort of Christian sect was it?
Well, it was non-denominational, so it's always hard to sort of pin down, but I would say it was very evangelical, and I would just say very fundamentalist, so kind of a literal interpretation of much of the Bible. It's not really possible to interpret all of the Bible literally because it just doesn't really work. It conflicts with itself. But yeah, I think, my dad in particular did his best and still does to try to interpret it sort of, which, in one respect is actually good. He's being honest about it, and he's trying to actually really be sincere. On the other hand, that leads to a lot of, I think, closed-mindedness and, frankly, psychological harm that can occur because if you're sort of forcing this on your kids, and reminding them that, they are nothing without God and they deserve essentially to burn in hell forever because they're, worthless. But then you give the caveat of saying, but, Jesus died for you, therefore, because of God's love, you're welcome back into the fold. And so it was sort of a strange thing to grow up with that in your mind, constantly thinking like, I'm horribly worthless and I'm this evil sinner that deserves to burn forever. But, I have this salvation. It doesn't really allow you to develop a sense of self-confidence, I think, or self-reliance. And so that was pretty challenging. And I took it very seriously. I was very much a devout, believing Christian really early on. And then,
so your earliest memories would be as a devout Christian.
Yeah. I mean, I remember having these conversations as soon as I could talk, and
right.
and then I really devoted myself to it. I have a little bit of OCD, so I had stacks of notebooks, with prayers written out, and I read the Bible obsessively, wow. And I prayed constantly. But then after reading the Bible more and more, I found things that were morally questionable, especially in the Old Testament, where God was telling the Israelites to kill these people or, save the virgins for yourselves. This is in the Bible. People seem to forget.
Well, after you've killed all the men.
Yeah. Right. And that's literally in the Bible. So
kill the men and rape the woman.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So there were things like that just struck me as immoral. And no one was telling me this. This was just my own innate sense of morality. And so I slowly just left it behind very uncomfortably because I still believed in hell. And I still thought, well, if I turn my back on God, I am going to go to hell. But I felt so strongly that this was so immoral and that, the only reason I was believing at that point or trying to pray or anything, this was probably late teens, the only reason was out of fear.
Right.
And so eventually I thought, well, if God exists, God would have to understand that, I can't have this sort of relationship out of fear. That was my conclusion. And so I left it behind, and then I learned about all these different philosophical traditions and empiricism and epistemology, and kind of was able to, have a sigh of relief and realized, there's actually no evidence for this stuff, and so I don't really need to be worried about hell, which is kind of funny. It's sort of the opposite of how a lot of people leave their faith. They discover empiricism and that we need scientific evidence for these claims. But for me, it was really more of a moral quandary, and that's why I left it. So then,
sorry, just to drill down on that. So you're saying it's immoral. The Bible is immoral.
Aspects of it, sure. Yeah.
So maybe a better way of putting it, there are aspects that are immoral, and they conflict with the truly moral sections.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously some good advice and some wisdom in the Bible, so I'm not throwing it out entirely. But I mean, if you read it closely, there's a lot that's rather disturbing.
Can you? I mean, we've had the virgin ones. Can you think of a few more?
Sure. Yeah. Aside from the genocide and the rape, even
minor things.
minor problems. I mean, even in the New Testament, I started reading that more closely and looking at. I even got Strong's Concordance, is that what it's called? I'm blanking on the name. It's basically a list of all of the words that you can find in the Bible and their original translations, and so you can actually go through and look at that and kind of come to your own conclusions. It's a lot of work. It's really studious. You have to be really studious and read these things. But, for instance, basically Christ was saying, if you don't believe in me and follow me, you're going to end up in this place called hell, which referred to like this burning garbage dump, and it's rather unpleasant. And so, I mean, I guess if you believe that Jesus is a deity and is worth worshiping and following, then what he says makes sense. But if you don't, it's really, if you think he was just a man, it's really rather, he had some strange proclamations, putting himself up to the level of being God and saying everyone has to humble themselves and follow him. It's
slightly arrogant, isn't it?
Slightly, yeah.
I mean, imagine if I went around saying I'm a god.
Right. So there are things like that, and Nietzsche has a lot of great critiques of Christianity as well. He calls it a kind of, a decadent religion. And I think there is something about it where you actually kind of offload responsibility. So the whole idea of, well, if you just ask for forgiveness for mistakes you've made or sins you've committed, as they would phrase it, then you're essentially off the hook. I mean, you do have to be, penitent, and you have to be sorrowful, but your sins will be wiped away.
Rape the virgins and then repent. And you'll still go to heaven.
Yeah, there are examples of people on death row, that have murdered multiple people, and then they give their hearts to Jesus right before they die, and then the Christians accept them as oh, well, this is so wonderful, and we'll see you in heaven. And so it's a weird sort of offloading of responsibility, sort of to the next life. And so for me, I'd rather take responsibility for my actions in the present and not have this. And that's the other thing I have a problem with, is this idea that everything's going to be great and everything's going to be sort of cleansed and made whole and perfect in the next life. And that it doesn't always, but it can lead people psychologically to not work on their own lives very much, I think.
So you saw that in practice in the people around you?
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm not going to call out anyone specifically, but
no,
yeah,
absolutely not. But sort of how did that manifest itself in these people? So I suppose they just continued, all the bad things in them continued to be bad. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think still, I think most people that I grew up with were still striving to be good in one sense or another. But I just found a lot of hypocrisy where, on Sundays they would say, oh, we're doing all this for God. And what was interesting, it's a slightly different topic, but there's always this idea that in the future there's going to be a revival and we're going to bring people to God, and again, it was always in the future, like things will change and get better. And I was, even as a believer, I was sitting there thinking like, well, and I would have conversations with my parents about this, like, why are we not, if hell is real as jumping off a cliff, why are we not witnessing to every single person? I mean, who cares about your job? Who cares about anything?
Right.
If it's eternity and it's real, we should just be spending our time, trying to convince...
Saving souls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I still think that. If it's real, then that's what we should be doing with our lives.
Yeah. So you're essentially saying they're not actually serious. They don't actually necessarily. They don't practice what they believe.
I don't think so. People would say that I was being too kind of stringent or something, or really the response was, well, people aren't really ready for this. The people on the street that you encounter aren't really ready to hear this, so you have to be. Which, I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of truth to that, because obviously, if you go around, people are just going to think you're crazy, holding one of those signs.
I wonder why.
Yeah, but also if it's true. And if you had evidence for it, and you could say like, "Oh, look, we have this video of hell that this is where you're going to go," then we'd be wise to spend our time, keeping people from that. I think.
I'm not religious. Never have been, and never will be. A friend of mine recently said that she was allergic to religion. And I sort of thought, maybe I'm probably allergic to religion.
Right.
But having said that, all those things that you've talked about, I've been aware of them for a very long time.
Yeah.
I've sort of been the polar opposite of your upbringing, basically. Okay. But one of the things I do when I travel, when I'm in Europe, I go to art galleries and I go to churches.
Sure.
That's the main thing I do. I love churches, right? Yeah. So there's talking about being a hypocrite, within myself is like, well, I'm essentially anti-religion, yet I'll go to these phenomenal structures. Notre Dame just been opened, and that was incredibly moving. It was incredibly moving when it was burning down as well.
Yeah.
So these things are really important cultural icons, artifacts.
Yeah.
And they have been created by Christians in the extreme.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So how do you square that circle? And then you've got you've got people like Jordan Peterson, who's in a sense a revivalist, Christian revivalist in a sense. Yeah. Even though he will never say whether he actually believes in God.
It's too complicated.
It depends what you mean by believe.
Yeah.
So I've listened to him and. Maybe, I haven't read the Bible, so I can't. I've tried, but it just got too boring. I got up to Noah, and that was it.
That's funny.
Couldn't get through. Same with the Quran. Couldn't get past the beginning. But, maybe there is some truth, that there is some moral value in it. But then, if there was, you'd still be a Christian.
Yeah, well, you can still say that there's some moral value, but whether or not it aligned with my own understanding of morality is sort of a separate question. Not entirely, but it can still have some value, but not be sufficient, I think. And I've definitely changed some of my perceptions, or some of my perceptions have changed about religion, in particular Christianity. Thankfully it's been modernized, and most people don't take it quite as literally or as seriously as the people I grew up with. And that took me a while to wrap my mind around that. There are Christians who are much more relaxed about this, and they're maybe just more culturally Christian, or they believe in some of this, but they're not going to shove it down your throat or say you're a horrible person for not believing or asking questions. So there's a huge contingent of, there are many sects in Christianity and Catholicism, but so obviously it's had a profound impact on Western culture, and I do think it's a mistake to throw it entirely out, because then what we get is these other, as Neil Ferguson said when I interviewed him, these other unorganized religions that crop up and are actually even worse in a lot of respects. They're not quite worse in the sense that we're not literally burning people at the stake, or we're not really going on crusades. However, there have been people that have been, where I lived in Portland, Oregon, there were riots for 150 days, I think it was, straight, and one guy did get shot, and the police were constantly attacked, and other people were attacked. So it has led to some physical violence as well, these other kind of pseudo-religions. So, I have a very conflicting view of Christianity and its influence today, because, I think I think it's just a cultural artifact that, if you grow up with, not just as a person, but as a culture, grows up with, a set of moral foundations and a perspective on how to operate in the world, and then you just completely get rid of that, or people slowly start to not believe it anymore, that will obviously have an impact, and often it's a negative impact. So you're
saying there'll be a moral vacuum. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If we dump Christianity altogether, there'll be a hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're already seeing that, in Western society, in the U.S. in particular, with with the trans issue, and with people being obsessed with identity politics and Black Lives Matter and all these things. I think people need a sense of meaning. So for me, it's more about meaning. I mean, morality is certainly at play here, but I think meaning is incredibly important. And while I disagree with Jordan Peterson on a number of things, I think he's absolutely right when it comes to needing a structure to your life and a sense of meaning and a story. It's just that I disagree on what that story should be. And I think it's challenging, but I do think it has to be somewhat individuated. I think we have to, as Viktor Frankl said, when it comes to meaning in life, you can't answer this question in sweeping statements that just work for everyone. So while I think, some collectivism or some sense of community rather is crucial and important, and Christianity did give that to the West, I think also allowing for individuation and critical thinking and being able to sort of step outside that freely is also crucial. But I think when we, as we have in the West, slowly stop believing what we used to believe, I think it clearly creates, whether there's a moral vacuum or a vacuum of meaning, I think that's pretty obviously happening.
Yeah, I always like using woke words. My lived experience,
right?
As someone who doesn't believe in gods.
Yeah.
I would say I've lived my life a very moral life, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to be. I'm not an ex-murderer or anything like that.
Right.
And
so you won't have to ask for forgiveness.
And so I've done all of that, I'll be upfront. Ethics and morals are really important to me.
Yeah.
I try to do good and be kind to people and do good for people and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I've done that without any religious background.
Sure.
I have gone to church services, I've gone to funerals, both Jewish and Christian and stuff. And I've got to say, I haven't found anything in the small amount of contact I've had with Christianity that has actually added any sort of moral value to my life. I think it's just added, all due respect to Christians, but it's actually added quite a lot of boredom. And to be clear, I have, I'm all for people who want to be Christians,
sure,
or whatever faith, knock themselves out. Why not?
Right.
What right do I have? What turns me on is different to what turns them on. Spiritually and all that sort of thing. But so I always find it interesting, just from what you're saying, what we just discussed, in sense, if we leave it behind, there may be a hole which will be filled with something possibly worse.
Yeah.
But in my own life, I haven't needed anything apart from just the embedded, natural, probably I would say humanist tendencies.
Sure.
And obviously, we are creatures of our culture.
Right.
So it's not. And again, here's the quandary. That culture has developed through the lens of Christianity until relatively recently. So am I being a hypocrite, for want of a better word, by saying we don't need it, but I'm standing, again, like Newton's quote, standing on the shoulders of giants?
Sure.
Or am I actually right saying these are humanist values? I mean, if you read, Marcus Aurelius or, the ancient Greeks, a lot of these great humanist values preceded Christianity by a long period of time.
Yeah, that's for sure.
On that?
Yeah, well, it's complex, but I mean, clearly we all have an innate sense of morality. Evolution has just drummed this into us for so long. So
Michael Shermer talks a lot about that.
Yeah. And so that's there. It manifests in different ways, and if you have a cultural manifestation of that is formed around a religion, it makes sense that when people leave that behind, especially in, like, my experiences, I did have that kind of framework for reality and what's moral and what's good and how to live in the world. And when that was gone, it was pretty devastating, and it took me a long time to kind of rebuild myself. Sounds like you didn't go through that, and so you didn't have that sort of starting assumptions, and you didn't need to break anything down and get outside of that.
So why did you need to break things down? I mean, you're going along here, but did your moral impulses change, or was that suddenly there was nothing, you're like the animal, the cartoon, Wild Coyote.
Oh yeah.
What's his name?
Right. Yeah, well, I think that's right.
I can never,
been a few
like
years.
He runs off the end of the cliff,
yeah.
and he's sitting there, and there's nothing below him.
Yeah.
Was that the feeling you had? You sort of walked off a cliff and like looked down, and there's no moral underpinning.
That's definitely how it felt. It just felt like there was no foundation for not only morality, but just the direction for my life.
But you didn't become an axe murderer.
No.
You didn't start robbing banks.
No.
You didn't start robbing old ladies in the street and taking their handbag.
No, but I was suicidal. Yeah, I was very depressed.
Yes, but so there was. Is that moral? That's a sort of psychological.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying that this is why I talk about the importance of meaning, because for me the sense of meaning I had was completely gone, and I think so I lost that. I think society, as a comparison, I think society is kind of losing that, and so some people will act out in crazy ways, and I think some people are like yourself and myself, perhaps. And I'm not trying to put us on a pedestal, but some of us are just more interested in reflecting on our beliefs and what makes morality work, and some people aren't, and I think that's fine. I think it's good to encourage people to be reflective and think epistemologically how they know what they know, but a lot of people are just not going to do that. I think we have to be realistic about that.
Well, most people aren't philosophical.
Yeah, they're not philosophical, and
there's nothing. It's just like I don't play soccer.
Right.
There's actually no difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an idiot when it comes to soccer,
Yeah. And so, but when it comes to morality and sort of how to orient yourself, it's pretty important to have some influence for the people who are not really going to think too much about these things. I don't think that without Christianity they're going to turn into axe murderers, but I do think that once those moral foundations have shifted, that people will gravitate towards things like trans identity, for instance, that leads them to think that they can transcend their bodies. It's a very kind of spiritual
dualist
idea, and so I think you get a host of problems can come from that, but like I said, it's complex. I don't think there's an easy answer.
Going back to the Bible, is there anything wrong with just cherry picking the best bits out of it and leaving killing and raping the virgins behind, and saying, we're living in a new age, and going and proselytizing on that? I mean,
for sure, yeah.
I mean, we had the event at the cathedral the other day, and I met the very Reverend Katie Lawrence. She seemed like an awesome person. And she's probably doing a lot of good. Right. So
totally.
And who am I to say that she's wrong? Right.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what the claims are in terms of whether or not she's wrong, but specific claims.
But maybe a better way is, even if she believes in God and I don't, I imagine she's probably doing good in the community, whatever that is.
Sure.
So, but I'm sure she's not believing in all the bad parts of the Bible. So I'm sure, this is not the best way to put it, but in a sense, she's probably cherry picking out of the Bible.
Yeah.
And is there anything wrong with that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, personally, for me, I don't want to do that. I mean, if I don't know, I don't read the Bible anymore, but if I found something that was inspirational or useful for my life, great. I found that in Eastern texts or certain philosophical works, and so I do that with a number of books. I think it should be treated like any other inspirational book, or a book that can be inspirational. And that's why I was saying that, thankfully Christianity has had time to modernize and be questioned and be kind of toned down. I hope the same will happen for Islam. There are some people pushing for that, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
But no, I think
all I can say is good luck.
Yeah, right. So I'm all for that. And some people that are a bit more hardcore would say, well, if you do that, then you're not really believing. You're not really taking.
So it's all or nothing.
For some people, unfortunately. But I think a lot of people are happy with the good parts, and it does help them live better lives.
So from what I'm hearing you saying, going back to saying how and probably most people aren't that philosophical. So is there anything wrong with having an institutional structure which says it's good to do this and not good to do that?
To dictate what people should and shouldn't do?
Maybe dictate, well, that's one way of putting it, or to encourage. Just having a framework by which to live by, a template. It's hard to sort of work all these things out yourself in a sense. Yeah. Even though I think, to your point before, we do have natural humanistic tendencies. I mean, it's in, the game theory, it's in my interest to be kind to you, to do all I can to make your life better, because then you're going to more likely to do the same for me. So it's actually it's beneficial for both of us. It's a win-win. Where if I did the opposite, you'd have the opposite effect. No, I mean, as long as it's not the government sort of commanding people to be moral in a particular way. I mean, we do have laws that certainly go into the moral domain, and I think that's important. You can't just go around killing people, and it sort of is based on that tit for tat. You, as long as you leave other people alone, you're not. It depends on the country, obviously. Now we're in New Zealand, so I'm not as familiar with the New Zealand laws, but yeah, I do think we should have some better institutions. It's hard. It's hard to say, like, can the church be replaced with something? The humanists have tried to do that. They've had like Sunday services, and they've sort of tried to go down that path, but it hasn't really taken on. No one comes, I imagine.
Yeah. I've been to some of them. It's mostly people in their 60s and above, and almost no one's there. So it's not very effective. But if we had some cultural institutions that encouraged us to be more reflective, encouraged us to think about the meaning that we want to get out of our lives, and not just be materialistic, and think about how other people are feeling, encourage gratitude and being kind, etc. I think those would all be great things.
The thing is, just going back to natural humanistic tendencies, if you think around people, most people are actually like that, regardless of what they think. Regardless of what religion they are. And this is why I find religion sort of not actually that useful, because most people, if they are ex-murderers, if they're Christian, they can still be an ex-murderer. And if they don't believe in God, they still could be an ex-murderer.
Sure.
So I'm not sure. I met a guy who was a car salesman, and I said, I was at a dinner party, and I said, what did you do? What's your history? And he said, well, I trained as a priest and practiced as a priest. And it was like, I just loved it, priest to a car salesman. And because most people have a pretty dim view of the morality of car salesmen, right? And I'm sure it's completely unjustified in most cases. And I said, why did you leave the priesthood? And he said, he basically said it was just so immoral. He said, the priest would be getting, 16-year-old girls pregnant, from the congregation, blah, 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 So they had the virgins, if you know what I mean. And he just said he couldn't take it any longer.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is, it doesn't preclude normal, not normal, but, people's natural propensities to do bad. Doesn't necessarily preclude.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I mean, the other side would be, well, maybe it does. Maybe less people would be like that. And again, sorry, but the Catholic Church. I mean, how many little boys have they done terrible things to?
Yeah.
So how do you? I find it interesting how people in the Catholic faith square that circle. I mean, you've got the people who should be at the pinnacle of morality and ethics, the actual priests themselves, you know. And again, how many popes have done that?
Right. Yeah,
So,
I think there's a difference between on the individual level and on what's happening, what's unfolding on a broader. I'm taking a broader view and saying that, you know, when we lose some of these values that are in the culture, then that can lead even more people to act more immorally. So not necessarily on the individual level. Like you know, you and I obviously don't need religion. Even Jordan Peterson would say, "Oh no, you are religious because of X, Y, and Z."
Yeah.
That's an absurd statement. Just because we value certain things and like to reflect and like to orient ourselves toward particular goals doesn't mean that we're religious. I mean, that's just expanding the word to be basically meaningless.
Mean everything. Yeah. Which means it means nothing.
Yeah. So on an individual level, obviously, as you said, you have non-believers who are very moral, you have believers who are immoral, and vice versa. But yeah, we can't really run the experiment, you know, one world without these moral precepts from religion and one world with, and see sort of how they fare. Maybe there's some broad societal studies about that, but you have other religions that, you know, in Asia and elsewhere, or just, you know, family values or different cultural values that have led to some of the same things. You know, we were in Taiwan earlier this year, and I saw that, you know, they have some religious structure, but it's pretty loose. Most people don't take it too seriously.
Confucian?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things because they're ethnically Chinese, but Taiwan they have their own identity and they're democratic and they're not communist. It's great, but they're big on family values, and there's also, I think, a culture of shame, which typically I'm against. I don't like that, but the way that it operates,
quite good.
The way that it operates,
we want to shame people out of being ex-murderers.
Yeah, the way that it operates there was, I thought, quite good. So, you know, you don't necessarily. I'm not making an argument for Christianity, just to be clear. I'm just saying that when we lose certain, for instance, if the people in Taiwan lost some of the family values and the cultural values from the ancient religions that influenced them, I think that would be a problem. Again, I'm not. You know, I think most of those people are not really very religious. They don't really, even though there are temples everywhere. But again, it's just like, it's something you do. You pray to your ancestors. You don't necessarily truly believe it. Some people do, obviously, but yeah, I think really I'm just saying. I mean, again, this could be if we lived in a multiverse, you could have another verse with another Earth where people have run different programs, you know, different cultural programs, and that are religious. And when you have nothing to do with Christianity, it can be a completely different story. And then if you start to lose that, you could have problems. That's really what I'm saying. So that's the only reason I'm hesitant to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, you know, can we modernize Christianity even more, or any of these other religions that have such a profound impact? Because I was speaking with Sarah Hayter, who's she's an ex-Muslim. She runs the ex-Muslims of North America, I believe, and she was saying, "Oh, you know, all Muslims just need to become atheists. You know, this is the solution." And I said, "Well, one, I think that's just really unrealistic, and I mean, I have profound respect for what she does. I think Sarah's great, but I was arguing for, you know, more of like, if there's a way to modernize Islam, and again, maybe that's too challenging because they think that the, you know, Quran is the literal word of God. But again, I grew up with people who thought the Bible was the literal word of God. So but I don't think it's impossible.
You've got to think of the numbers, so that's a different thing.
Sure. Yeah. The numbers are not on our side. Yeah.
And just going on, what's her name? Hayter?
Sarah Hayter.
Sarah Hayter, that's right. I do think Ayaan Hirsi Ali's conversion to Christianity is interesting.
Fascinating,
Because, you know, I don't think you can just say they'll turn everyone into an atheist. Because I think once you've brought up, I'll use the word indoctrinated by religion, because in a sense you are.
Yeah, for sure.
And in a sense, we all are. You know, I'm being indoctrinated to not have religion. But actually, maybe that's not quite true.
Yeah.
But there's no indoctrination. But I think once you instill that in children, even once you leave it, it must. You know, there's probably that hole there.
Yeah.
I mean, well, can you speak to that experience yourself? I mean, you're not going to convert to Buddhism or anything soon, are you?
No, but I certainly value...
You've really left it behind, and there is no hole there for you anymore?
No. Yeah. So there's a few things. One, just to pick up on Ayan, she was actually arguing for Muslims leaving the faith and becoming Christians before she became a Christian in her book, Heretic, I believe.
Oh, right.
Yeah, she sort of apologizes in her book to, Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and says, but I do think this is a better route because they need some... And I thought that was an interesting argument. But that aside, so there's a couple things. I mean, I do appreciate aspects of other religions and other, thought traditions like Buddhism. But interestingly, so it's kind of a twofold answer. I was always told that without Jesus in my heart, I would feel like I had a hole and I was empty. But it was, if anything, it was kind of the reverse in the sense that I already felt kind of empty and depressed and like this wasn't a very fulfilling framework for me. Mm-hmm. And when I left it behind, when I got over the difficulty of not having a good understanding of how to orient myself in the world, when I was able to kind of build that structure for myself, then I felt like there's no hole at all. If anything, it was the opposite. I finally felt relief, and I didn't feel empty, and I didn't feel like this belief and this set of Christian values are supposed to be doing something for me that they're really not. So if anything, it helped tremendously.
well, Richard Dawkins talks about that, about how many people come up to him and say thank you for releasing me from these chains, essentially.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You talk about story and meaning. Mm-hmm. So what's the important... And you are a storyteller, a documentarian.
Yeah. Maybe I'm biased.
Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more on why stories are important?
Sure, yeah. I mean, just obviously they're important for entertainment. They're important to engage a deeper sense of connection. I mean, if you watch a powerful film, like it really sticks with you, even if it's fiction. You can easily be moved by it's the combination of the music and the acting and the good story. And so I've always been trying to tell people, like in the atheist community and elsewhere, the anti-woke space, like you need good stories. You need moving stories, because I think the intellectual exercises are useful and they're helpful and we need them. But as Jonathan Haidt talks about in The Righteous Mind, we have reasons not really. The reason in our brains where we try to pick and choose what seems reasonable, that's not really in the driver's seat. It's really more of your moral intuitions and your emotions. And he compares this to a rider on an elephant, where we think the rider, which is reason, is in control, but the elephant's just going to go where it wants to go. And so he was essentially saying the more we can influence people's elephants to go in a better direction, the better. So that's one reason that I think, whether it's fictional or documentary or whatever, having good stories that move people, get them thinking, get them reflecting, because maybe they're not interested in epistemological inquiry.
So you're saying that what stories do is subvert the reason part of our mind, in essentially the frontal cortex, for want of a better word, and actually go deeper into our more ancient part of our brain.
Yeah, I'm not sure if subvert is the right word, but it certainly has an influence on that deeper part that moves us to want to reflect, I think. That's certainly been true in my life. When I see a good film or hear a good story, it makes me actually then be more interested in reflection. And I think that can be true for people, even if it's not fully conscious, or people are not necessarily articulating every step of the process out in their brains. If something moves them in a particular way, my girlfriend, she's Taiwanese, and they were going to be voting on gay marriage in Taiwan a few years ago, and there's that great bit from Carl Sagan about the pale blue dot and how everything. Because he had I think it was the Voyager, turn around and take a picture toward Earth, and you can see this from Saturn. Okay, yeah. You can see this ray of light and this tiny dot, and then he has this great sort of poetic story about how everything that you care about is on this tiny
everyone who's lived, all the madmen, all the dictators, all the
and
the children.
She used this story to convince her dad to vote for same-sex marriage, and I thought that was really fascinating. So this is a story that moved him more. I mean, obviously he was being logical, he's thinking through things, but he was given kind of a broader perspective, and then he changed his mind. And I think that's a good example of the power of storytelling. I mean, there could be many examples, but that one sticks with me.
Yeah, well, in a sense, stories, I mean, I just wrote this down, stories are data compression in a sense. They compress a lot of meaning into a very small amount of space.
Yeah.
And therefore their impact is very strong because of that. And they can short circuit or I don't know, they can often be more powerful than actually empirical data.
Yeah, because it moves you emotionally. So,
yes, and our emotions are more powerful than our reasoning capacities. Yeah.
And so, maybe you could argue that thinking things through intellectually can have an effect, but it often doesn't.
Right.
And so an effect on the deeper operation of your brain and how you feel about something. Obviously, it does. But if you're able to sort of tap into the deeper undercurrents of how you feel about something and your moral intuitions about something, I think that's a better way to help orient people in a positive direction.
Yeah. So storytellers are actually some of the most important people in our society.
I mean, I think so. Yeah. I mean, obviously, then that's sort of putting me on a pedestal, which I'm not trying to do. But I think throughout time,
it's just saying, in general,
Yeah.
So what is your now that you've abandoned Christianity and all that? What is essentially your story, and where do you get your meaning from?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it took me quite a while to figure that out, and I did read a lot of Eastern philosophy and other philosophers, and I had to think a lot about what gave my life meaning. And so, somewhat ironically, I suppose my goal became to help other people reflect on their beliefs and where they get their meaning. And that, to me, when I just channel that into storytelling, and I show that, or I try to show anyways, that, like, for instance, adopting a trans identity when you're 13 or 14 years old isn't going to lead to the best outcomes, or going out in the street and rioting for Black Lives Matter or whatever. These are not very fulfilling ways to live your life. So if I'm able to or maybe they'd be fulfilling for a time, but I don't think it's a very satisfying or healthy individually or for society way to derive meaning. So if I'm able to use stories, use films, whatever medium, to get people to be more reflective and move in a positive direction, that gives me a good sense of meaning. And then there are other things, connection to family and friends, relationships. Obviously, those are all key, but there's the higher sort of goal that I have in bringing this idea forth, the idea that we need meaning, that somewhat ironically gives me my own sense of meaning. So, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So let's get on to your documentary, the Woke Reformation. What is woke, and why did you call it the Woke Reformation? And what's going on in the world, and why are all these people wanting to burn things down?
Yeah. I hesitated on using the word woke because at this point it's well overused. But this was, I think, 2020 when I came up with that concept, because I saw in Portland, Oregon, where I live, people just losing their minds about Trump, losing their minds about George Floyd. Not to say that there wasn't a legitimate injustice, before people's eyes. Obviously, there was, but that doesn't mean that it's okay to just literally start burning down small businesses or police stations or hurting anyone, including cops.
And a lot of those small businesses were owned by black people.
Yeah. But frankly, it doesn't matter. I mean, whether they're white or black or whatever.
No, but there is an irony there.
For sure. Yeah, and people would put up what Douglas Murray called the "Please Don't Hurt Me" signs, the BLM signs, in hopes that their store would be passed by. But there's so many pictures of broken glass and Black Lives Matter signs in the same building. Young
men like to smash things, basically.
Yeah.
It's not old women doing it.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So woke is essentially just a catch-all term for progressive leftism, but you can more specifically talk about what Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay called critical social justice, and that's sort of a loosely based ideology based you can trace it back pretty far, but it's based on a lot of it's French postmodern ideas that we've moved beyond modernity, and now you mentioned lived experience. Everyone can have their own subjective interpretation of the world that is just as valid as anyone else's. You can obviously see where that leads to trouble.
Well, tell us where it leads to trouble.
Well,
what could possibly go wrong?
Right. And it is sort of mixed with a kind of neo-Marxism where we're no longer interested in class. So it's not class-based Marxism or communism. It's identity-based Marxism, essentially. And so when people have these competing identities, that's why you see all these people clamoring for victimhood, because the bigger victim you are, the more status you have. And so that's where some of the lived experience comes in, because they say, well, my lived experience as a disabled black lesbian is, it's so much more powerful than yours, and it gives me a sort of a lens through which to view the world, and I have certain rights based on that experience. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not. For instance, people were saying, tens of thousands of people, after George Floyd, people were saying tens of thousands of unarmed black people are being gunned down in the streets. I mean, even LeBron James tweeted something to that effect.
Just a short interruption to add some context and the number of fatal shootings of armed and unarmed individuals by the US police force. In the US, there are over 50 million interactions between civilians and the police each year. On average, there are roughly 1,000 fatal shootings per year by the US police. This is one fatal shooting per 50,000 interactions, or 0.002%. The approximate racial breakdown of the fatalities is 50% white, 25% black, 20% Hispanic, and the remainder Asian, other, and unknown. 95% of all US police shooting fatalities are men. More than half of the people shot and killed by the police are between 20 and 40 years old. An extensive 2018 report titled Reconciling Results on Racial Differences in Police Shootings by Harvard economist Professor Roland found that, quote, police fatally shoot nearly 1,000 individuals a year in the US. As the report argues, the incidents that have ignited protests, that is, white police officers killing unarmed black men, represent less than 4% of fatal police shootings, unquote. The Washington Post calculates this percentage as roughly 5%. Based on Professor Fry's analysis, US police killings of unarmed black men account for less than 40 fatalities per year from roughly 1,000, and from 50 million interactions between civilians and police officers. As a percentage, this equates to less than 0.00008% of the 50 million interactions per year. See the links in the show notes for Professor Fry's report, a New York Times article on the report, a Washington Post article on police shootings from 2015 to 2024, and a bar chart of the numbers. And now, on with the show.
My jiu-jitsu coach and author, Matt Thornton, talks about, if you look into that data even further, you realize that the handful of people that are unarmed, often they have like a car and they're trying to drive over the cop, but they're unarmed, so they're classified in that. So it's actually...
Right. So they're armed with a car,
yeah,
but they're not armed with a gun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's actually pretty amazing. There are tens of millions of police interactions every year in the U.S., and there are more guns than people. Of course, I'm not really pro-cop in the sense of... I'm pro-police force and law, so don't get me wrong, but I've had some negative interactions with the police because some of them, they are bullies and assholes, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of them are...
some of them are.
Yes.
Just like some dentists are probably bullies and assholes.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure. But I do think there's a little bit of something to this idea that they have a certain kind of power that they can wield over people.
It attracts a person who likes to wield power.
It can, but obviously there are many people who just...
But then there are people who want to actually look after communities and do good and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Keep people safe.
Exactly, yeah.
Solve crimes.
So if you look at the statistics and you realize that, cops are sometimes just shot for no reason when they pull somebody over.
Well, can you imagine stopping someone in America?
Right, yeah. And they could have a gun under their seat.
They could have a gun anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even conceive of doing that.
Right,
right. Just to pull someone over is extreme bravery.
Yeah. And so if you actually put it into perspective and you know the numbers, it's like, oh, wow, they're actually really, really good at doing what they do. And any death is a tragedy, but the numbers are it's shocking how good we have made our police force.
Right.
I mean, it used to be much worse, especially in the 70s and before. And there has been, and I'm not saying there's no overt racism in some of these, enclaves of cops, but it's amazingly a small amount. And Derek Chauvin was convicted, the guy who, put his knee on George Floyd's neck. So clearly the system is actually working to a great degree, and I think people forget about that. So even if someone says, well, my lived experience as a black person is I need to be terrified, I need to teach my children to be terrified. I mean, there's some truth in teach your kids, whether white or black, to obey the law, respect police officers, don't make any sudden movements when you're at the car and are pulled over. That all makes sense. But this idea of that you're a victim because of your skin color or any of that, it just doesn't apply in the U.S. Just to be frank, it just doesn't apply. I mean, if you know the data, maybe it applied 40 years ago, but at this point, it's just not true. So that's one example of lived experience kind of going awry. And there are many others, but yeah.
Well, what I was going to say was that it's harking back to stories and the power of stories over raw empirical data.
Right.
That's a classic example.
Yeah,
because people are actually being told a story that, to quote LeBron James, there are tens of thousands of black men being killed.
It was something like that, or maybe he just said that he was afraid as a black man to go outside. I can't remember. It was a tweet, but it was ridiculous.
Ferrari.
Yeah, it was.
Or was it a Lamborghini?
Right. Yeah.
Must be terrifying for him. And he's all of 6'6" or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Must be shocking and totally ripped.
Yeah. Right.
Must be terrifying. But yeah, so the power of stories, in a sense, the woke story is incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I know a lot of people who are very convinced by it.
Yeah, sure.
And no matter how much argument, or not discussion is a better word, dialogue is even a better word, they hold on to it very firmly.
Yeah. And again, even there, good stories, or often it is stories, can convince people to leave it behind. I mean, I know a number of people who used to describe themselves as woke and then left it behind because they realized that this wasn't the story they thought it was. This actually isn't realistic, and it's
same
not
experience
healthy.
that you had as a Christian.
Yeah.
Right. I thought in your film there was the cameraman. Corey talking to the guy with the beanie.
Oh yes, Eric.
And so the beanie guy was obviously on the woke spectrum. Correct?
Yeah.
So that was interesting watching that, because even though, one, it was impressive that he actually had a conversation with Corey.
Yeah, right.
And because most people hesitate to or won't.
Yeah. It took me a long time to find somebody. So kudos to Eric for doing that.
Yeah. And, in my own experience, it's I was going to say it's practically impossible, but I'll put it more positively. I've yet to find someone to come on the podcast, who is on the woke spectrum. If there's anyone listening, give me a bell, because I'd love to have you on. But it's very hard. Well, Peter Boghossian talks about it. It's very hard to change your mind, isn't it? Especially in real time. Yeah,
for sure.
Are you still in touch with, his name was Eric?
Eric, yeah.
So, and did that have any effect on him, or does he still strongly believe his positions? Yeah,
I mean, I think both Corey and Eric walked away from that conversation. I did some kind of post interviews of each of them, and Eric did mention that he had some presumptions on how Corey would think about these things, because Corey happens to be black, and so it was very clear that he was even more reflective on some of the presumptions and beliefs he had. I don't know, if he fundamentally changed his mind, but I think both he and Corey, through that exercise of having that conversation, were I think grateful. And I was nervous because I really didn't. I like Eric a lot. He's been a good friend. I haven't spoken to him much recently, but we've worked together on film sets, and so I was very nervous because I didn't want to, make him sort of the villain in the story.
Yeah, exactly.
So I tried really hard.
He's on film. You don't want to make him friend look bad or anything. Yeah. Well, that's. If you can pass on my regards to him in the sense that it's impressive that he came on. Yeah. Because most people wouldn't.
Yeah.
But.
I ran into him, I think, 6 months later at a bar, and I asked, or I think it was in person, but I asked him if he had seen it and what he thought, and he really liked it. So I was really grateful for that. And then I actually put him and Corey in another film of mine where we had even more conversations. This was about gun control, so not about race, but so obviously he was willing to go through the process again. So I think that's great, and again speaks to his courage and so yeah, there were a lot of people on YouTube sort of railing against him,
right?
And I kept saying arguing against that, because again, that's if you do want someone to change your mind, that's the worst way to get them to change their mind.
He's just holding ideas.
Yeah,
and he's the last time I looked, we live in a free society,
right?
And as long as he's not saying things like "let's kill all the Jews" or whatever, it's completely valid that he holds those ideas.
Of course,
he may even be correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Shock horror,
Yeah.
So that's. But I think we do have this natural propensity to hate on people who have different views, which is our tribal nature.
Yeah.
When was it, last year sometime, I got asked to chair a discussion panel at a documentary forum, a forum for documentary makers in Auckland. And ironically, it was a discussion panel about cancel culture.
Okay.
And I had, me being naive, I thought, you could go in and talk about anything, but became very, 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 very quickly aware that the room was exceedingly progressive.
Okay, yeah.
I'm hesitant. I've been told by friends never to use the word woke, but I will use it. They were, woke up the wazoo, basically.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the question and answer session, there was this guy at the end who'd been holding his, a European guy. He had been holding his hand up, and, we hadn't quite got to him. And then I finally pointed to him, and he said, as a white man, I shouldn't really be saying anything in this situation. And it was like, oh my God, on what grounds should you not be saying?
It's skin color and genitals.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Shows how stupid I am. I was just absolutely flabbergasted. The irony, I almost got cancelled by the audience.
Oh, wow.
At a discussion about cancel culture. It was great.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But why I mention that is, not to try and get any victim points, but going back, we've had this, essentially the premise of our discussion, or the findings of our discussion so far, the stories are really important and they're really powerful.
Yeah.
And people lead their lives, they're led by the stories that they're told and they tell themselves.
Right.
And I looked at this room and I thought, it was 100,000 million% ideologically captured. There was only one view. The antagonism that I received for saying quite some rational things, totally normal things.
Yeah.
Was, there were a lot of daggers being said to me. And I thought, hold on, these are the storytellers. So... yeah. Is that disturbing?
It sure is, yeah.
And so maybe the question is, you're a documentarian, and the ecosystem that you live in or work in, what's the state of it? And I'll just add in one more thing, which I've mentioned a number of times on my podcasts, and talking about Meg Smaker, the incredible filmmaker who made The Unredacted,
right?
Formerly Jihad Rehab, and she's she got into Sundance, one of 12 films out of 30,000 applied.
Wow.
And then she was attacked. She was attacked for being a racist, a white supremacist. I mean, it's funny, but it's tragic, because Sundance pulled it,
right?
Apologized for it. Everyone, and leading figures in it apologized for it. It was like a struggle session.
Right.
It was pulled from every film festival in the world except for the Dock Edge Film Festival in New Zealand.
Right.
It's made me proud to be a New Zealander.
Yeah, that's great.
So her life has been shattered. She is an exceptional documentary maker, filmmaker, artistic it's beautifully artistic, beautifully put together, great, a phenomenal storyteller, and she's been banned off the face of this earth.
Yeah.
So what is that? Is that an aberration, or is that sort of thing part of your ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I was working and living in Portland for 16, 17 years, and so it was very difficult there. I wanted to show the film publicly at certain places, but I thought, no, I'm not going to do this, because there's a large group of Antifa there, which are left-wing militants that use violence to shut people down. They are fascists. They're promoting anti-fascism with fascism, quite literally.
And guns and sticks and fire.
Yeah, and so I decided, I really didn't want to endanger anyone. I also didn't include a lot of people's names, as I mentioned off camera, in the making of the film. Who, my musician, who's one of my best friends, many other people who didn't want to be a part of putting their names on the film, because they live in Portland, which is a very woke city. And so, it's challenging, even in the process of making that and other films, when I started to put stuff out like this, I got called a racist and a transphobe and all these things, so people wouldn't rent out their studios to me. But, I was going to pay them to use their studio to film something, and they didn't want anything to do with me.
So that's a cancellation, a form of cancellation.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's putting friction in where there shouldn't actually be any friction.
Yeah.
Because you're not a Nazi or an ex-murderer. Or,
right. Just telling stories.
Serial killer.
Yeah.
Anything like that. Yeah.
So it does happen.
You actually have a legitimate right in free society.
Right.
To just do normal activities.
Yeah, you would hope. Yeah. But I think the tide is turning. It's challenging because obviously, Netflix and much of Hollywood got on board with it, and they all had Black Lives Matter, months or, whatever. And a lot of them pushed the trans stuff. And so, it's challenging in the U.S., but I think more and more people are realizing, like, first of all, it's not a very good moneymaker, especially now that it's not as popular. And also, these companies can make money with content that pushes back against some of this stuff. So some of them are realizing that, like Eli Steele, he's a filmmaker. His father's Shelby Steele, who's written some really great books.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's a great documentary filmmaker, and he made a film called What Killed Michael Brown. Michael Brown it was kind of an early, I think it was 2014 or 2015.
Under Obama, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was under Obama, and it was in Ferguson, and it was a very popular BLM. The BLM movement got a lot of traction from this.
Michael Brown got shot.
He got shot, yeah.
He was trespassing on someone's front lawn or something?
No, so what happened in this case, I think that was somebody else, but he had stolen some stuff, I think, from a mini mart, and the cop got a hold of him, and he ran away. And the story is that, and this is where "hands up, don't shoot" came from, and people were using that line in chanting it even in London, where there are no guns. The police don't carry guns. But Shelby Steele calls that.
Stop you. Yeah.
No, Shelby Steele calls that the poetic truth, that what happened was,
Right.
he put his hands up, and then the cop just shot him dead. But then there were all these investigations, and
Sorry,
it turned out.
What do you mean by poetic truth?
Yeah, so Shelby Steele uses that term to describe not what actually happened, but what sounded good and what moved people. So
it's a beautiful term.
It's a story. It's just it's loosely based on reality, but it's not actually accurate. And so it has this kind of poetic. It sounds good, but in reality, Michael Brown is a 6-something, 300-pound guy who actually he did run away, but then he turned around and charged the cop, and the cop told him to stop, and he wouldn't stop. So obviously, this guy, he had no other choice, and he was already attacked by Michael Brown, so he shot him, and that's what happened.
Well, it's sort of, you don't want a good story to be diminished by the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I bring this up because Eli Steele was going to put his film, which lays all this out in a really excellent way, on Amazon. And he had released stuff on Amazon before, and he uploaded the video, but they kept denying him and saying that it wouldn't go through, and they wouldn't explain why. So then he went to Vimeo, and Vimeo put it out, and he started making money on it, and it sort of took off. And then Amazon came back and said, oh, yeah, okay, you can release your film here.
Right.
So once these companies realize that they can make money off of some of this stuff, I think that will help shift things in a better direction. It's still hard. There's still only, like, the Daily Wire, for instance, that's making films that has any kind of real traction.
So that what?
the Daily Wire. They're making
yeah.
their own films.
Yeah.
They have their own more conservative views and ideology that they're kind of infusing into some of their films, at least a little bit. But there aren't too many centrist or right-leaning, popular media sources that are making really good content. So it's hard to find a platform other than if you just create your own, and that's has its own challenges.
The irony is, I always find it interesting. Creative people tend to veer left politically.
Yeah,
which I find fascinating. There are very, very few right-wing or conservative artistic people.
Yeah. Or artistic in a different way, perhaps, but not in storytelling and filmmaking. I think.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd say in most creative fields. Yeah. Well, I think that's about it.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and continue the great work. And I'll put I'll put your YouTube channel in, and all your links, and a link to the Woke Reformation.
Perfect.
Is there any final comment you'd like to say? What can people do if they find that people are cutting off the genitals of children,
right,
and they don't like that?
Yeah.
If they find that fully grown, intact men are coming into women's changing rooms,
right?
The list goes on. What should they do?
I do have another film, just to plug my other film that's coming out called Uncomfortable Truths: The Reality of Gender Identity Ideology, that lays all this out on the gender topic. But the thing that I've been saying for a long time is speaking up is the most important thing. Everyone is always saying, "Oh, well, I'm worried about my job or my standing at this social institution or whatever." But the reality is that the more people start to even just ask questions, even if you don't want to be too bold and be too abrasive, I think that's good. Just ask simple questions.
Put some friction into the system.
Yeah, and it can be done in a way that is actually honestly innocent. If people say, "Oh, we need racial quotas," oh, why? Or kids need to have their genitals chopped off, or need to take estrogen, or just ask, well, what are the long-term implications of that? Just asking questions in and of itself is useful. So that doesn't require too much bravery. It requires some, but I think I was at a bar in 2021, I think, and I was hanging out with my friend and a couple of girls, and immediately, George Floyd came up, and they were talking about, oh, we can't really pass judgment because of our white privilege. And I immediately just said, oh, I think that's bullshit. I don't believe in white privilege. And then it completely changed. They were just like,
really?
Oh, you know what? We don't believe in that either. And then everyone relaxed. And we could have a conversation.
You have to, as Douglas Murray says, he steps on the landmines, so
right.
People walk through.
Yeah.
Right. So actually getting back to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Speak the truth.
Yeah. Speak the truth. And again, there are ways to do that that's not too confrontational. And I think that if people just think about that a little bit and think about what questions they can ask in their organization or business or their friends, who are transing their kids, I think that's the best way to go. And then, you can show evidence and that sort of thing, but as Peter Boghossian, just presenting evidence to people won't change their mind. It may have a backfire effect. So it's better to ask questions. It's better to, gently nudge people in a particular direction, I think.
Yeah. So. Well, it's a nice way to finish. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
To help the Shape of Dialogue grow, please subscribe, like and comment, and share it to all and sundry. Many thanks.